All right, let us talk about this full moon in Libra that is now a little less than 48 hours away. There are a few things about the full moon I want to say. As you always know, full moon is a time of energetic concentration, excess increase, emotional excess increase. Um, as I like to say, the wave starts to head towards the shore at the time of the new moon about 2 weeks ago, and then at the time of the full moon, it crashes to the shore. So there's an escalation over 2 weeks of energy, of intensity. This happens every 28 days, and then we have a full moon. This is the last full moon before two eclipses. We will cover that in future videos, but it is so greater intensity, greater productivity, things getting done, things coming to a head, a feeling of conflict between opposing forces, um, on the more negative or challenging side, emotional meltdowns and reactions and intuitive awareness and alarm and all those full moony, wolfy things that we associate with the full moon, sensual excess, tears, fluid excess, so to speak. And then, of course, on the positive side, there could also be culminations or opportunities or offers, or even sometimes a marker of a departure. Um, now, it is a Libra full moon, and it is an interesting full moon. With an The moon is famously well placed in the sign of Libra. So archetypally, as full moons go, generally speaking, this would be what we might conventionally call a relationship related harmonious full moon, if there's such a thing. But I would still watch out for excess. Now, if you, for example, are a Libra rising, if you ever have a full moon in your first house, so if in this case you're a Libra rising, watch out for, and sometimes this can be necessary, watch out for a meltdown. I mean, either you're going to have some sort of temporary visibility into something, so it could place you temporarily in the limelight, or else watch out for, sorry, someone's mowing the lawn. It is a beautiful day here in Maryland. Or watch out for something happening where you feel you need to assert yourself or set a boundary in some way. So a full moon in the first house is a famously tantrumy full moon. It's a famously it's a famously sort of I'm leaving this room full moon in a certain sense. So there are, and again, I would just continue to handle energies with care over the next 48 to 72 hours, but also I would pay attention to, with any full moon, what is coming up for you or others. So if there is an emotional excess or meltdown or something that seems to rise, as I usually say, the pot of milk comes to a boil around the time of a full moon and can overflow, then if you are on the receiving end of it, either as a listener or as a target for someone else's meltdown, really listen to what is going on, because there's some sort of internal emotional truth that's probably repressed or suppressed that is emerging and is worth looking at. And similarly, if it's you who's having to do it, I would still pay attention to what this polarity is. The sun is in Aries, in a sign that where it is famously happy, and the moon is in Libra, in a sign where she is famously happy. They oppose each other. The sun in Aries, along with Jupiter in Aries, along with Mercury till yesterday, now Mercury in Taurus, but more importantly, Chiron in Aries. The Aries archetype is very much of, all right, spring is here, the new year is here, the spring equinox has happened, the days are getting longer, let's get moving and let's start to move towards our goal. It is let me just use the word selfish, or let's just say self-oriented energy. Me, my desires, the pursuit of my goals, the shortest distance between what I want and what I want to get, and how I go about getting it, the pursuit of goals and the implementation of boundaries. The sign of Libra is famously or notoriously focused on relationships with others. Very much the reputation of a velvet glove. And I would say velvet glove. I think with the sign of Libra, it is a cardinal sign. So I would say iron fist and a velvet glove. But there's a great, it is notoriously as sugary a sign as Aries is I don't give a toss sign. So with the sign of Libra, you have a lot of care towards how your words and sentiments are landing. Where is there energetic excess? How can things be balanced out? How can there be peace and harmony? And how can we move towards some sort of together or collective compromise or harmony? So you have the sign of Aries, famously uncompromising, and you have the sign of Libra, seemingly compromising. But it is a polarity between the self and important contractual relationships with others. Libra is a sign that in modern terms is associated with marriage, personal partnerships, and I'm talking not about dating necessarily as much as I'm talking about places where we are sharing resources or there is some sort of a commitment, a verbal commitment, things are more serious. But it's also professional partnerships. It could be legal adversaries. It could be known opposers or enemies. It could be the significant other party with whom you are in relationship in such a way that it can actually affect your life and your well-being. When there's cooperation and harmony, then things are in balance. When there's not cooperation and harmony, there are challenges. So a Libra full moon, well placed during a season of pursuit of goals, a focus perhaps on archetypally how it is that in the pursuit of our goals we may be relating to others, and there may be things that come up as a result of that emotionally, intuitively, that we need to look at. The moon opposing the sun's full light on the moon may be reflecting back intuitively, emotionally, certain truths and certain intensity that it would behoove us to consider and take into account as we pursue those goals. Now, that's based purely on the signs where the sun and the moon are placed. Let's continue to talk about the full moon and the actual astrology related to this full moon. The full moon itself opposes not only the sun, but also Chiron in Aries and Jupiter in Aries. The Sun and Chiron meet up tomorrow. They conjunct tomorrow. So by the time we get to the full moon, the conjunction has already happened and the moon has already opposed Chiron. That said, in about 4 or 5 days' time, the sun will conjunct Jupiter in Aries. And so the full moon, after it is full, on its way as it continues to move through Aries over the next day and a half following the full moon or so, it will oppose Jupiter in a pretty full state. Now, this is where knowing your chart will be helpful. The sign of Aries is where we're dealing with healing old wounds. I'm going to keep this very simple and very archetypal when it comes to Chiron. And with Jupiter, where through the middle of May of this year, we are creating, ideally, an auspicious new beginning, or the start of a 12 or 13-year cycle and the end of a 12 or 13-year cycle. So if you know where Aries sits in your chart, what house it occupies, what that house stands for, it will be easier for you to have a sense of how these energies are playing out in your life. And also worth noting, very importantly, is that Aries is the sign we have 2 new moons this year. One we had 2 weeks ago, and then we're going to have a solar eclipse in another 2 weeks. And for the next 3 years, we will be having solar eclipses in the sign of Aries. So the sign of Aries, starting very shortly, is going to be where we are going to need to focus our energies and our development and our growth. It is where our lessons and learnings and growth will come from in a necessary way if we want to be on the right track and continue to feel like we're leading a fulfilled life that is in line with whatever it is that we're being called to do. So the sun meets up with Chiron tomorrow. There's some sort of a download or a conversation between our inner knowing and whatever it is that we're trying to heal in the Aries part of your chart. And I know where and how this is resonating for me personally very strongly. It is a very personal, very clear thing. Over the past week and a half, this energy has been building and becoming clearer. So again, if you know where Aries sits in your chart, what house that occupies, what it stands for, you can meditate on or think about where this conversation is happening between what sort of healing needs to take place in the Aries part of your chart and how it is that your inner truth and your inner consciousness is in conversation with Chiron around this. In 4 days' time, that inner consciousness, that inner truth, our sun, our internal light, will meet up with Jupiter, and there will continue to be a conversation over the next 4 or 5 days between us quietly, inwardly, and whatever new beginning is being created, the start and the end of a 12 or 13-year cycle in the sign of where Aries sits. While all this is happening, the full moon occurs opposing this healing, new beginning energy. And so there's a need there are three things that come to mind. One is that there might be a need to pay attention to things that are more mundane, or I'm trying to find the right way to put this. There may be a need temporarily to pay attention to anything, and particularly if we're dealing with relationship conflict. There may be a need to pay attention to those factors or things that could either block or get in the way of this healing opportunity and new beginning opportunity. I'm going to hasten to say again that unless this full moon is making some sort of a challenging aspect to your natal planets, which it might, just because it's in Libra, as I've said at the start of this, doesn't mean that it's going to be necessarily a harmonious time for you over the next 48, 72 hours. It is a full moon, it is a handle with care time, it is a try to remain as balanced as you can time, but also understand that if your milk needs to come to a boil, your pot of milk, then find a way to have that communication, or at least understand or determine what it is that is so disturbing to you that is coming up, and honor it and figure out how it is that you can set boundaries, etc. around it. Now, there's something energetically and intuitively as we look at the moon and as the full moon stares down this healing conversation and new beginning conversation that is happening in the Aries part of the chart that needs attention. So I would very much look to it from the perspective of, as I am clear that the growth that needs to happen and attention needs to be paid into the Aries part of the chart, what is it in the Libra part of the chart that is coming up in such a way that is cautioning me and requiring integration, both to continue with this healing process and also ensure that these new beginnings don't get blocked? Okay, so that could very much, it could be related to things that have been going on in the Libra part of your chart, especially over the last week or so. It could be something that is coming up on the heels of the Mars-Saturn trine on March 30th. So if you think back over the past week, I would say, yeah, past week, week and a half, as you headed towards March the 30th, was there something where boundaries needed to be set? And it could be, it's a Mars trine Saturn thing, goals being pursued, boundaries needing to be set, and awareness. And if you look at, there was a video, a couple of 2 videos ago that I did on dishonesty. Both the last 2 videos will talk to this, so there's more detail there, and I'm going to encourage you to look at that. As you headed towards March the 30th, was there some place or something where, I'm going to just say it's as if the cup of water cleared and you just knew what you needed to do to handle and balance energies that have been sort of in play for at least a couple of months, if not since August of last year. Okay, separate last 2 videos, you can look at that. March the 30th is when the Mars-Saturn trine happened. But also on that date, we had a Venus-Uranus conjunction. So the second thing that this full moon could signify is some development related to the Taurus part of your chart where the Venus-Uranus conjunction happened, and there was an opportunity in such a way that there's a next step or a next level or something that continues with that opportunity that may have made its presence felt by or around March the 30th, that then continues this. To remember that there's one more eclipse in Taurus in October. So this year there is this handoff between the North Node eclipses in Aries and the North Node eclipses in Taurus. So while we're going to have a North Node eclipse in Aries in 2 weeks' time, we also have the last of the Taurus eclipses, which is what we've been dealing with over the past couple of years, in October. So the Venus-Uranus conjunction happened in Taurus. What opportunity came up related to where the sign of Taurus is in your chart and the house it occupies around March the 30th? And is there some further development that continues to be in conversation, some sort of culmination, some sort of offer, some sort of opportunity that continues to be? And I say this especially because one of the two transits that is happening during the time of this full moon that doesn't concern the moon technically, although it's important, concerns the fact that shortly after the full moon, Mercury and the North Node will conjunct in the sign of Taurus. And so some communication regarding the Taurus part of our chart, some processing, some mental processing, some transactions, some communications, some conversations, again, transactions, technology, the use of technology, something around transacting in the Taurus part of our chart in a way that leads to areas and topics or subjects that are geared towards our future growth, where we need to lean into, where we need to learn some lessons, where we need to develop, may well brew over the next 48 to 72 hours. So I would pay attention to that too. And so that way, this opposition of the moon could bring, or this full moon could bring, some sort of culmination that helps continue this conversation that is happening, this healing and new beginning conversation in Aries, and the opportunities that continue to be created in the Taurus part of your chart. Remember that Mercury entered Taurus yesterday. It is going to go retrograde in Taurus in a few weeks' time. So it's going to be in Taurus for an awfully long time. The Sun in a few days will conjunct Jupiter in Aries, but then in a couple of weeks' time is going to enter Taurus, and we will have a new moon in Taurus as well as we head into May. So the Taurus part of our chart is going to show increasing mundane day-to-day focus. We've just had the Venus transit, we've just started the Mercury transit, and soon the Sun will come in and we'll have a new moon there in about 6 weeks' time. Okay. The other transit that this new moon encodes is the fact that for a while the North Node, as it transitions from Taurus to Aries, is going to square Pluto, which is transitioning and going back and forth this year and next year between the sign of Capricorn, where it's completing its transit since 2008, and into Aquarius, where it's starting its transit currently. Remember, when it's a square, energy needs to be given to the faster moving entity to free up the slower moving entity to do its job. The North Node is extremely important right now. You've got to lean into the North Node, and remember, with the North Node, you've got to follow it in a grounded way. You need to be clear about what your parameters are and what your tolerance is for the kind of fantasy, magic. You know, it's okay to have a call, but you've got to remain grounded when you pursue the North Node, or it can really do a number on you. It can cause significant material challenges, and it has this kind of magician quality. But then to follow your calling and to do the hero's journey that the North Node requires, if you're not careful about it, not everyone is interested in a hero's journey where you kind of have to sleep on footpaths to get to where it is that you need to and want to go. So there will be compelling need and compelling reasons to lean into the North Node, but handle those energies with appropriate care so that you are clear during this process about what your level of security and abundance is and how you're going to maintain it as you lean into the North Node. But leaning into the North Node, the Taurus part of your chart and the Aries part of your chart, and the lessons that are coming in through the Aries part of your chart, and the action that needs to be taken in the Taurus part of the chart in order to develop that through October, and then over the next 3 years, the healing and the lessons that need to continue to be incorporated in the Aries part of your chart, capitalizing on the new beginning there that's happening, the new 12 or 13-year cycle that's happening there through the middle of May of this year through Jupiter, are an important point of focus, because by leaning into them, you are freeing Pluto to complete its transition work, transformation work in the sign of Capricorn, wherever that sits in your chart, and start the effective and appropriate transformation of the Aquarius part of your chart. If you don't lean into the North Node and lean into the activity that is occurring in the sign of Aries and Taurus currently, Pluto could create complications that are harder and bindings and control issues that are harder to free yourself from. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. You know where Capricorn and Aquarius sits in your chart. So again, in this reading, I'm trying to cover things that could be applicable to different people, those who know about the chart and those who don't. Full moon is ruled by Venus. Venus is in Taurus, a sign she rules. Venus is the ruler and dispositor of this chart. Opportunity, financial, relationships, harmony, balance, flow, receiving. I would say enjoy as best you can the next 48 to 72 hours and pay attention to any messages and information and awareness that you get that is related to healing, balancing, and moving in the right direction. And if there are emotional excesses or people setting boundaries or you feeling like you need to set boundaries, see if you can somehow find it in you to do it in a more Libran manner, in a more graceful manner, in a more balanced manner. But don't ignore that either. Okay, if you found this useful, feel free to share it. You know, a full moon occurs over the next 72 hours. After that, for about 4 or 5 days, you'll really have the most productive days of the month. So we look forward to those. Feel free to share, comment, like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the bell icon and the wiggly bell thing on top of that bell icon to be notified whenever I do new videos. But I hope you found this useful. And until the next video, thanks.